We're going to look at Luke chapter 8. We're continuing our series in care, and we're going to read verses 40 to verse 56 of Luke chapter 8. Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. And then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." And then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet in the presence of all the people. She told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. And then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe and she will be healed." And when he arrived at the house of Jairus, he didn't let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. And then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. Loving God, thank you for your word, and may we hear your Spirit speak to us this morning through your word. We open ourselves to you. Amen. How do we make decisions about who is worth helping and who we can't help? An example of this is how much we spend of NHS money on individual cases. Gene therapies for rare childhood conditions such as spinal muscular atrophy can cost over £1 million. Enormous steps in medical treatments have been made, and there have been some amazing, wonderful stories recently of successful treatments like this one last year of 14-month-old Thomas, who was diagnosed with OTC deficiency, received gene therapy, and has been healed. But is it right to spend so much money on one child when that money could be used elsewhere to help many people? Should we prioritize children over adults, young adults over older adults? When there's a finite pot, how do we decide who deserves a bigger portion? Who is more worthy of our attention? With Jesus, it's not a finite pot of money that is the limiting factor, but a finite pot of time. Our story today invites the question, who should Jesus be helping? Last week, Sarah shared with us the story of the woman who came to Jesus and washed his feet with her tears and dried them with her hair. It was an action that others thought distasteful because this woman had a bad reputation, but Jesus saw as beautiful. He contrasted her devotion to that of his host, Simon, who was a Pharisee, who did the minimum expected for his guest, Jesus. He was cold and judgmental. From that story, it's clear that Jesus has a place in his kingdom for the outsiders, for the broken, for those who messed up, for the sinful, those whose life is chaotic. Jesus said himself, it is not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. And so the question is not so much whether Jesus is welcoming those who are on the margins, because we know he is, but will Jesus have time to help the one who appears to have everything together? Not the down and outs, but if you like, the up and ins, which is our story today. Will Jesus help Jairus, a community leader, a synagogue leader? Jairus comes to Jesus. This is what it says, verse 41. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. Jairus is desperate. And Jesus' response reveals that Jesus is willing to help all who come to him, including the up and ins. But on the way to Jairus' house, a woman from within the crowd comes and touches the hem of his cloak. In contrast to Jairus, this woman isn't even named. She's not known to anybody. She's a nobody, anonymous. And she's unclean. According to Jewish law, her bleeding, her hemorrhaging, she shouldn't have actually been in that crowd, mingling with others. She should have been well away from everybody, which is possibly why she was very slow to confess she was the one to have touched Jesus' clothes. Socially and physically, her suffering has gone on for 12 whole years, which is the exact age of Jairus' daughter. This isn't an accidental detail. 12 years links these two very different lives together. One, a girl of 12 years who should be on the verge of going into womanhood and marriage, and in those days, this was the age of moving into adulthood, and her life was before her, and yet is on the verge of death. And the other, a woman who has suffered the whole length of this girl's life, 12 miserable years. Long-term illness is very hard. And for those of us that have suffered with things for a long time, maybe one of the takeaways this morning is the fact that Jesus is still bothered with us. Even if we've been going through the thing over and over again, we can still bring it to Jesus. If you've been suffering for some time, Jesus is bothered with you, even if it's gone on for 12 years. Despite the differences in their situations, their status, their access to Jesus, because they have different access to Jesus. The woman has to push through the crowd. Jairus seems to be able to talk to Jesus face to face. One thing that connects Jairus and this hemorrhaging woman is their desperation. Jesus responds to all who call on him in desperation. He hears us. And let me ask two questions then about this story. The first one is, why does Jesus stop? And the second one is, should Jesus have stopped? Why does Jesus stop? Jesus knows someone has touched him. Verse 45, who touched me, Jesus asked. And when they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. But Jesus said, someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me. I kind of envisage Jesus doing the teacher thing at this moment, which I've got back into, where you kind of let it know that you know what has happened, but you're just waiting for them, giving them an opportunity to come and tell you. And you just wait with that meaningful silence until someone cracks. And this woman here, she cracks. She doesn't say it at first, but then she cracks. It says a woman, verse 47, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. But why does Jesus stop? Why does he make her confess what has happened? He's got urgent business. He's on the way to help this 12-year-old girl. Why does he stop and bother? The healing's happened, but why does he have to have her come and confess that it was her who touched him? I think there's something quite important here. I think the first thing is that faith is personal. There's some evidence that Jewish people at the time, part of their belief in the coming of a Messiah was if you touch the hem of their cloak, then there would be power, there would be healing. And this woman probably knew that, and that's why she just knows if she touches the hem of his cloak, then she might be healed. She was reaching out, thinking Jesus could be the Messiah. But unless Jesus had actually stopped and brought this to light, her faith somehow remains impersonal. It's a bit akin to magic. The Messiah is merely simply a source of power, and there is no personal connection. And in contrast to that, Jesus stops. This woman needs to know the Messiah is personal. The most important thing is not the power, it's not even the healing, it is the relationship with God. She is accepted. She is loved. She is valued. This is more important that is communicated in her contact with Jesus than her physical healing. And she leaves having met the Messiah, not merely having received power from the Messiah. Jesus tells her to go then in peace, which means shalom, wholeness. The wholeness comes from knowing God. Faith is personal, it's not a magic power. And over the centuries, Christianity's had to struggle with this. And it still does. We still sort of think about power as the main thing. Power to heal, power to raise the dead. And it can become an impersonal thing. And yet the reason Jesus came first and foremost is for a relationship, that we would know God. We would know his acceptance. We would know his love for us. We would know that we are invited into his kingdom. And we would learn to hear his voice in our lives. Jesus stops because that's the woman's most important need. The other thing to note is that whilst it's personal, faith is never private. Proclaiming who Jesus is and what he has done is good for others, yes, because they hear about it, but it is also important for our own faith. In declaring what's happened to her, this woman is bringing a healing from the private to the public, from an inner encounter to an outer confession. And I think in doing that, this somehow cements and solidifies the experience. It helps her in her own faith and understanding of what has happened. I think it's not that dissimilar. The reason we physically take communion, we don't just remember that Jesus died for us. We physically do something because it helps us as human beings. This is the way we work. By the physical act of taking communion, there is something that happens. And actually, we're doing it visibly in front of others. Same is true of baptism. We haven't just come to belief in Jesus. We physically show this to people, and it does something in us as we do so. Our faith is personal, but it's not private. We need to share with those who ask. We need to witness to the goodness of God. We need to tell others of answered prayer and ways in which God is speaking to us. And as we do, we find that our own strength, our own faith is strengthened. It is good for us, and it's good for others. Which brings us to the last question. Should Jesus have stopped? He's on his way to Jairus' house. Remember, Jairus is desperate. Hasn't Jesus got somewhere to be? Shouldn't he be hurrying as quickly as possible? We're not told how Jairus is reacting at this point, but Jairus may well be enormously frustrated by what Jesus is doing here. And whilst it just says that one word, or one sentence Jesus says, the implication here is that Jesus is actually doing a bit of teaching around this. And Jairus is presumably getting extremely frustrated because he knows his daughter is dying and he needs Jesus to come on. Maybe he's getting angry. Come on, Jesus, we need to go. And then, as Jesus is talking, the devastating news arrives. Verse 49 says, while Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore. The servant bringing the news of the girl's death assumes this has now placed her beyond Jesus' power, and yet we know that it hasn't. Don't bother him anymore. Not even death is beyond Jesus' power. I don't know about you, I am not brilliant with interruptions and distractions. I quite like my plans. I like setting out my agenda. I know what I'm going to do. I know when I'm going to do it. And if something comes and interrupts that, I find that quite difficult. And I get a little bit shirty at times. It takes me a little bit to get used to a new plan. Maybe you are different from that, but I think that's the way I'm wired. And for any of us who are wired that way, who don't like interruptions, what I'm going to say next is hugely challenging. We need to be open to God-directed interruptions into our plans. We need to be open to the fact that God sometimes might interrupt all the things that we planned. What we planned is good. What we planned is sensible. It makes sense. But actually, there are times at which God has another agenda item for us. and that needs our attention. We need this within our church. I mean, we plan our services, it's good to do that, but actually we need to be open to the fact that God might have something different than we've thought of at this point. But we plan our meetings, our life as a church, and also individually. You will have plans all the time. We need to be open to what God is asking us to do. I believe Jesus here, in stopping for this woman, was following the prompting of the Holy Spirit. He is open. He is willing to be interrupted, even though he knows that he needs to get to Jairus' house. Heidi Baker has been a missionary to Mozambique since 1995. Some of you may have heard of her. She is known for her personal compassion, her focus on the poor, and her emphasis on simply stopping for the one who is in need. On one occasion, Heidi was on her way to speak at an important pastors' conference in Mozambique. Hundreds of leaders were already gathered, waiting for her to arrive. The schedule was tight, and her team urged her to keep moving so they wouldn't be late. But as their truck bounced along the rural dirt road, Heidi suddenly asked the driver to stop. On the side of the road, half hidden behind a cluster of bushes, she had noticed a small boy sitting alone in the dust. His clothes were torn, and he looked severely malnourished. Most people would have missed him entirely, or assumed that someone else will help later. Heidi stopped the truck and climbed out, and she walked over to him. The boy didn't speak. He was weak, frightened, and clearly abandoned. Heidi sat down beside him in the dirt. She wrapped her arms around him and began to pray quietly. Her team reminded her the conference was waiting, but she shook her head. "This is the conference," she said. "This is the one Jesus wants me to stop for." She lifted the boy into the truck. She took him to one of the children's homes that her ministry was involved with, and over the next few weeks, he received medical care, food, and a safe place to sleep. Slowly, he began to smile again. Eventually, he started school and became part of a new family. Later, when people asked why she had missed the opening session of the conference, Heidi simply responded, "If we don't stop for the one, we've missed the whole point." I love that. If we don't stop for the one, we've missed the whole point. Care is willing to be interrupted. So who is more important to Jesus? Who is worth stopping for? Jesus' love and care does not discriminate in any direction. The woman whose life has been torn apart by long-term illness is worth stopping for. But so is Jairus' daughter from a prominent family. A family of good social standing. She is also worth stopping for. Jesus responds to all who are desperate, to the insiders, the up and ins, and to the outsiders, the down and outs. Jesus stops for us all, and we need to be willing to stop for all those who the Lord brings our way, willing for our plans to be interrupted. Let me just read this letter in closing. Dear preacher, I'm a member of your congregation. I sit before you in silent desperation. I'm a mother of a good Christian girl who just told me that she is pregnant. I'm a husband whose marriage is falling apart, and no matter what I do, I can't seem to stop it. I'm a child who tried so hard to win the affection of my dad, but all I hear from him is how many times I mess up. I'm a senior citizen who sees that my life is coming to a close, and I'm worried and scared, not knowing if my life has made a difference or if my future is secure. I'm a father of 3, and the doctor just told me that my wife can't possibly live more than a couple of months. I'm a widow who sits alone in my home, so lonely, yet no one seems to care. Oh, preacher, you can't see my desperation by looking at me. I've learned to hide my feelings so deeply that sometimes I can even fool myself. The people who sit on either side of me would be surprised to know that I walk the floor each night and cry. The preacher, when I sit in front of you on Sunday morning, I don't want to hear your thoughts on transactional analysis or theological conundrums. I don't want to hear the latest Reader's Digest joke, and I don't want you to share a few blessed thoughts that you gleaned from the night before. Preacher, I feel hurt, empty, and useless with nowhere to go. And my question to you is this: is there any word from the Lord? I want to say to you today, there is, And this is it, that each one of you is precious to God. Wherever you are, whatever you've done, whatever is happening in your life, you are known by him and you are loved by him. And if you come to him, and if you are desperate today, come to him because he will stop for you. No one is beyond the pale, not the ins and ups or the downs and outs. None of us is too bad, none of us is too good. He stops for all of us as we reach out to him. Hear the word of the Lord today. Jesus will stop for you. And just as you hear that, let me just add a caveat. We also need to stop for each other. As he stops for us, let's learn to stop for each other. For our lives to be interrupted, our plans, our agendas, to respond to what the Spirit is saying.